to do the things that you need to do to get to that level, to be a name actor where the three of us would go, oh yeah, you have to be looking to fill a hole in your heart that is so huge. Say, my dad didn't really love me. My parents didn't love me. I can fill that hole with the love of a million people. If I could be famous, that would remedy the situation. That is a very important thing to understand about a lot of people who get to that level, because you don't get to that level without really wanting it badly, which means you are working from some wound, and it's hard.
Wow.
I've never heard it put like that.
Thought of it like that. He had it all. Hollywood success, millions in VC, a dream career, but then he walked away.
Today, we're going to explore the decisions that change everything. The ones made at the intersection of life, death, and the truth about success.
So today's guest, Steven Puri, is a leader with a remarkable journey from Hollywood executive to tech founder. But today we're going to be talking about his most profound chapter yet. Steven, welcome to Decisions That Count. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, this feels like a weighty episode already. I'm excited.
You've worked on some incredible movies, some of my favorite movies, and I really want you to name drop here and maybe just tell us a little bit about what your role was and what life was like in Hollywood.
When I was at the University of Southern California, I had come from Virginia, where I grew up, and I knew engineering. My parents were both engineers at IBM. When I came to USC, I fell into film because I happened to be going to school at the same time that computers became powerful enough to manipulate film. There was a great need for people who could speak creatively, because I had a lot of friends who were, aspiring filmmakers. I'd worked a little bit in television, but also speak engineering. I started producing digital effects, the parts of the movies that were digital, right? I also started producing title sequences, which often were involved, $500,000 to $1 million title sequences for the directors. And I was very fortunate because with our fees, we didn't get first-time directors. Like, you couldn't get a studio to spend the amount of money it took to work with us until you were 4 and 5 studio movies deep. So I worked with Jim Cameron on True Lies. I worked with Mel Gibson on A More Beloved and Braveheart. Worked with Jim Jarmusch on Dead Man with Johnny Depp. Worked on Dead Presidents with the Hughes brothers. Worked on a bunch of stuff. And then after doing a bunch of films like that, met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin when they were coming off Stargate, and I came aboard to produce the digital effects, and it went very well. We ended up winning the Academy Award for the visual effects on that movie. Roland, Dean, and I got along really well, and the conclusion of Independence Day was, hey, let's the three of us set up a company together. So that kind of solidified, okay, this is actually something I'm going to do for like 10 years of my life. Most of my 20s were producing the digital parts of movies, right? Including when we set up Centropolis, running that for 4 years. Ended up selling that. A German conglomerate. The best analog in the United States would be like Liberty Media. So a company called Das Werk. Obviously you knew Roland Emmerich. He's like, the German director. He and Wolfgang Petersen were like the big German directors at the time. And made us an offer. And at 28, sold my first company. As one thinks in their 20s, you think you're better looking than you are. You think you're smarter than you are. You think you were successful than you are, And it definitely was like, oh, wow, that wasn't that hard. This whole building a company and selling it, this is great. We should do more of this, right? So that was a big turn at that moment, because I did have some money in my pocket, didn't have to work for a couple of years. My girlfriend was a flight attendant for her friends, so we got to travel a lot. One of the things you guys are contributing to your audience and contributing to the world is this sense of decisions are important, that they're not necessarily scary. If you really examine decisions that scare you, you can, declaw them or defang them and start to make them very rationally. And those decisions are what craft your life and the world around you. I now know what it's like to be successful in visual effects. I've spent from 20 to 28 doing that. Is that what I want to wake up, be 30 years old or 40 years old, 50 years old, making the effects for someone else's movie? And I thought, no, maybe in an egotistical way, I thought there's something greater for me than being a hired hand to make this, even though, it feels kind of glamorous. Like you're on set all over the world and shooting stuff. Bottom line, you could be a great carpenter and also be on set around the world. You are a craftsman who makes something. And that's when I thought, could I actually make a movie? Could one of these movies be something where I found the script, where I nurtured the script, worked with the writers, did that thing? assembled a cast, got a director interested, got it financed and all that. And that became my next thing. So I had lunch with a few friends that were already producing films. And I was like, listen, I happen to know Mel Gibson, Jim Cameron, David Fincher, like I worked on Seven, like all these people on a first name basis. They know me. How can I parlay that into being a producer? And my friends who were producers were like, you don't understand how far you are from actually being a producer. There is a whole different vocabulary of development. There's a different set of people that are involved with all these scripts. You have to know tons of writers. You have to develop taste. You know, I would be getting handed scripts saying, the studio has decided to fund this to the tune of $172 million. Can you, for $15 million, make the effects, right? Very different than trying to get someone to say, here's $172 million. Okay, you know what? Several friends who were smart in the same week said the same thing to me. So I was like, okay, what would you do? Tell me. And what's curious is two friends that I respect said the exact same thing. They said, if you can put your ego on the shelf, maybe, tell yourself it's grad school or something and make you feel okay with it. You need to go be an assistant. In other words, be a secretary. That took a moment of, how does that fit in with my narrative? Like, will people look at what I've done and say, and then why did you go to be a secretary, or something wrong with you, And I thought, these are people who have done what I need to do. Who better to trust, right? Whom better to trust? The girl who interviewed me, Bridget, who's great, she's at YouTube now. She was like, well, why are you here? I was like, listen, I'm happy copying scripts, getting coffee, whatever you need. She's like, really? And you'll do that for free? I was like, I'll do it for free. Because happily I had, some money in the bank. She's like, when can you start? I'm like, right now, I'm doing nothing. My life is, I do nothing, right? She's like, okay, come upstairs, and started having me copy scripts. I went home that night, changed the top line of my resume to intern, Summit Entertainment. I sent it to another management company, went into the interview. It was clear they never read beyond the top line. The second line was President Sidropoulos Flex. The top line was intern. And they're like, yep, that pattern matches what we want. When can you start, kid? And I was like, okay. Everyone else was like 24. They were hiring for this. I was like 29. I was like, okay, let's do this. And that was my entree into actually film development, which is where, yes, I was around Sony, went to DreamWorks. The chairman of Fox Films Entertainment said, listen, I'll double your salary from DreamWorks. Whatever you make, I'll just double it. Just write it down on a piece of paper. But I bet you grew up watching Die Hard. Tell him I did. How would you like to be the executive on the next Die Hard movie? I'm like, me? Really? Hold on a moment. This is a hard one to say no to. Oh, he said, you want to do the next Wolverine movie? You can do the Wolverine franchise here. I was like, okay. So ended up saying yes, even though my friends all told me it's a big value mismatch. Like their values at News Corp are very different than mine, which was ultimately true. But, it was the appeal of doing that. You're going to write the next great novels. You're going to create a company, create an app, create a new restaurant, whatever that thing is, sculpt something. It's very easy in our society to get zero effort dopamine. Just scroll and double tap and we'll just serve you up, brain rot. And that's something I was very passionate about. I said, okay, so that's really, I think, the thing I'm doing to influence the world for my kids more than anything. So this year I want to share the things that I've learned. And traditionally I've spoken for honorariums and stuff and done all that. And I said, you know what? Between now and when Satish, our son, comes, anyone that has an audience that could benefit from this, I'm just going to speak for free. And that's how we met. It's what I'm doing for probably the next 4 or 5 weeks. And then I know you guys know better than I do the road ahead of me, but I know it's going to change. And I will not be like, hey, let's do a podcast. I'll be like, who's got the fresh diapers? Did we order diapers? I haven't slept. Have you slept?
We talk about decision fatigue all the time. And I guess one of the things I try to impart to people is first that decision fatigue is a biological reality, right? It's just a physical limitation of our brain. Caused by this overstimulation, too many decisions. You already touched on it, like those dopamine hits. The thing about all those hits on social media that we're getting is those are decisions we're making, right? And the second thing I really try to impart to people is what you just touched on, though, is that like when we're making all of these decisions every day, we're just exhausted by decision making and we get decision fatigue and we're no longer really capable of making those big decisions about chasing our happiness or our goals or things like that. And it's biological, right? And that's why one of the reasons I love this podcast is you get to see, like, I'm a cell molecular neuroscientist. It's tough to bring that to real humanity, right? But how you just describe this kind of zombie mode brain rot that so many of us are on. And I think your mission at your company is fantastic just because it's getting people out of that, right? Out of those distractions, which is limiting them.
When you talk about protecting brain energy and really like when you get to that point of decision fatigue and the quality of your decision making goes down, right? You can have your brain energy sapped by these because when you have $1 trillion company, you can buy the best behavioral psychologists, the best engineers, the best UI UX designers to finesse every single bit of that sound, that push notification, that rounding of that button, the color that appeals to you, the way the recommender engine says. That level of sophistication is not random. That is someone saying, can I just continually do things to make sure that we sap your brain so then you become incapable of getting out of the maze? I really hope, like my children's generation, I hope they look at us and social media the way I look at my dad's generation and smoking. I hope that's social media for us. So our kids are just like, guys, how did you waste your life brain rotting and just giving up, your life?
You touched it with that like brain rot, because I think we'll wake up after 20 years of social media and be like, what the hell happened with my life, right? Every day I was just exhausted by all of these attention seeking apps and whatnot. And then, I'm worried that there's going to be a generation who's been like, what did I do the last 20 years? Oh, wait, I was on TikTok.
I have a question for the two of you. When you need to do something meaningful, a task, what pulls you away? What is the distraction that pulls you away? And I know, some of that is family where it's like, okay, my kids have to be taken care of or fed, right? I understand that. But what digitally is the thing that gets you where you're like, you got me?
It's honest to God, it's all this freaking productivity software. I have my life was so simple before I met Michelle.
Describe
I used to have email and WhatsApp, maybe, right? But now I have like Slack and Notion and what are all these, Michelle? I don't even know all these different things that go on my computer.
This is, the
Michelle's superhuman, but...
Frame and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you asked that question because I'm going to tell you something now that Shawn doesn't know yet.
Ooh, sweet new for both of us.
It's new information.
She was in prison.
I was in prison. 2 weeks ago, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD.
Join the club.
And there we go. Combined, so hyperactivity and inattentive, leaning slightly more towards the inattentive. Shawn knows I was going for the test, and this is very common with women my age, that I was looking into it for one of my children, realizing that I was ticking way too many of these boxes and had the full kind of test. You asking what is distracting, I'm now becoming like hyper aware of. I've always been able to multitask and do many things at once. And I've always been able to enter the flow state really easily into things that I'm super passionate about and I'm really into. So I've always kind of like leaned into that, especially at working in advertising, social media marketing, being able to jump from many different things and have many different things running at once. But I have been trying to become more conscious as to where my mind wanders and where it's slipping and where it's going. And I've been writing it down. So like I've literally kind of got this piece of paper next to me with like, thoughts and things as they pop into my mind. And that is like a big messy to-do list because it's like, oh, I need to message that person, I need to do this, I need to do that. But yesterday, the two things that like really sent me on a rabbit hole was like something around manifesting for my husband, because he sent me like he didn't know he was sending me mantras, but that's what he was sending me. And I was like, okay, we need to change the way that these are written, that they're not about, I don't want this, and more to be about what you do want. So, so I then kind of went on like a 20-minute rabbit hole of like rewriting all of his like mantras. And then I got served a video from my Sydney Marathon that then took me on a rabbit hole of like wanting to watch back all my videos from a Sydney Marathon. And I was just crying because it's really emotional. But they were like two things that completely like derailed me.
You ran the Sydney Marathon?
Yeah, like a week and a half ago. Yeah.
That's fantastic. My hat is off to you. I have never run anywhere near that long except when chased.
Oh, it's a context. That's one of the best experiences of my life. What about you? What about your distractions? What causes
just to keep this interesting, I'm going to be slightly combative, okay? So you several times said how well you multitask. Now, there is a school of thought that we really only monotask, and you can add context switching into that. So you're monotasking, and then you sort of store where you are with something, jump to something else, load where you were with that, work on it for a while, save that context, reload this, and at the end of it, you actually have done slightly less, even though you feel like you've made progress on multiple things. If you had monotasked and serially finished things, you would have finished more. I happen to experiment with this because I thought I was a multitasker. I was working in Suka. One of the members is an ADHD coach. We'd become friendly in the group chat. We chatted. She's like, Steven, have you ever gone for diagnosis? I was like, I've not. Why? She's like, I just think you should. Right? Spot on. She was right. Yeah, I mean, she's an ADHD coach. She's not a medical doctor, so I had to go to a medical doctor. But that was very interesting. And does present more in that I believe things about multitasking and, in the lack of ability to hold attention on one thing more than hyperactivity. But regardless, I've come around to see the benefits of forcing myself to finish one thing. Have you ever experimented with that?
From a neuroscience perspective, I think it's pretty clear we don't multitask like humans.
This is getting good.
Yeah, I think it's pretty compelling data. Of course, none of it's 100% as it is with most things in neuroscience, but I think there's extremely strong evidence that we don't or cannot multitask. We can switch between tasks very quickly, but we actually can't, do parallel processing if you want to think of it that way. So yeah, no, monotasking is definitely the most productive way to do things rather than doing a bunch of things all at once. And by neuroscience, I mean like physiological studies. So not psychology, right? So actually just how your brain's infrastructure works. Maybe the second neuroscience to drop to is like on the distraction thing. I mean, what we know now is like a ding from, that damn ding from your iPhone or whatever, that ding notification. It can throw off your brain for like 20 to 40 minutes, say, it completely takes you out of your focus, right? So just the ding, it doesn't even need to be your phone, actually. Even just having your phone in the same room can do it, but a ding from a different phone can throw you out for that long of time period. And physiological is just like a habit that we've been trained to have, right? So then maybe the third science, just from Michelle's comment too with ADHD and distractions and stuff. We worked with some top folks before, be it in business or with top tier athletes. I've become a big believer in mindfulness. So I used to always think it was a spiritual practice, and I didn't really think scientifically for it. Nothing wrong with the spiritual practice, of course, but I didn't really attribute it to neurophysiological changes. The reality is, though, is I'm wrong in that there's fantastic evidence for the benefits of mindfulness. One of which is just, and you guys can try, or listeners can try, just like sit down and just do like a body audit, or just sit down and just try not to let your mind wander. And I bet you for most people, including myself, when I tried to do this, when I'd sit to try to be still and just not think of anything, my mind would wander within 3 to 5 seconds. The good news, though, and all the stuff that we've talked about has trained us to lose our attention, right? So the time period from that wandering is happening quicker. Our attention span has dropped by 30% since the year 2000, humanity at large, right? But mindfulness, we can actually begin to train that. So we can start to think about it as like a muscle to try to train that distraction and that inattention. It's been shown to work, right? And so even in situations of decision fatigue or whatnot, I found it's been a great practice just to try to rebalance, recenter, take a pause from those distractions, and then re-engage whatever task I was doing. So long-winded story, but I guess a lot of the things you've come to learn about yourself, actually there's science evidence for it. So you're bang on for how you think about tasking.
What you touched upon, Shawn, is something that is very dear to my heart, which is I experienced a flow state before I knew that was a term, before I knew it was a thing. And it was a very strange experience for me. I was flying here from Austin to San Francisco. The next day, I was going to meet with my team, and I wanted on the flight to jump into Figma and kind of like hack together a feature to show it, say, could we do this? So I got on, Alaska runs that nonstop route. I got on the flight, Wi-Fi's out. Okay, fair enough. Take off. 15 minutes later, we landed and I was like, an engine fell off. Like, we're in Dallas, something really bad happened and they don't want to tell us until all of the tires are on the ground, right? Look at my laptop. 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by since I looked at the time. I had no concept of that. We were in San Francisco and my designs were done. And I thought they were good, debatable, but I felt that I realized where I wanted to realize in that. And I had prepared myself for, I'm going to get there, run through the hotel lobby, grab a sandwich, go to my room, hack away on my computer for the next day. I was able to call a buddy of mine and be like, hey man, I'm in SF. Like, I have a free night. You want to have dinner? And that was really, really nice to feel in control as opposed to being controlled. Just to set the table, because I know there's a bunch of your audience that's super like, we're flow masters, we get it. And there may be some where it's more of a passing, I've heard the term, but could it help me, right? So it's just level the playing field, which is a Hungarian-American psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, had a thesis that high performers seem to describe these highly concentrated states they get into in very similar terms. The states where they do the stuff that makes them famous or changes the world, right? So he's like, I want to find out, like, go up to Olympus, steal some fire like Prometheus, bring it down to the rest of us. He wrote the seminal book Flow, from whence we get the term flow state. He said, I think a great thing. He's like, I chose this word because it's the most beautiful metaphor I could find for the fact that we are all on the river paddling ourselves forward. But if you align your bow with the current, it carries you forward. You go further and faster. It magnifies your efforts. And that is what these high performers have figured out how to do. You lose track of time, distractions fall away, you do your best work, you feel a return of energy rather than drained of energy and things like this. And there are more. And he said, there are conditions precedent that these high performers use to get there. And when studying this later, because obviously on his shoulders of giants, other giants have stood and done amazing research that you guys know, and I've read some of that. They talk about like jazz musicians, when they're in flow, when they're in that improvisational, I can speak the English real good. Oh my God, wow. Improvisational, mode. They have measured how like their prefrontal cortexes, I guess, kind of shut down. And it's like the actual electrical activity in your brain changes when you get into that state where you're in the zone. And I think that is fascinating. The thing I've been working on for the past 5-6 years is all about how can we take these things that Mihaly talked about, put them in one website, because that's how important I think it is that people are able to fight off distractions, get into the zone, get into flow, get into whatever that highly concentrated state may be. And you're right, when you do that and protect your brain, you do have more energy and you have less decision fatigue, where you just start making decisions that you're being pushed into because you're too tired to resist.
Yeah, no, flow is interesting. It's one of those concepts that all of us can relate to, which is always interesting into psychology. Psychology itself is obviously a challenging science to prove things. They've been in a crisis for many years about the ability to replicate their findings. But I'm a big believer in it, even though there's no quantifiable metric for flow yet. Like I have yet to see a consistent, image of the brain under flow state, if that makes sense. Like there's not one thing that can define flow, but we can all identify and recognize it. I would just say for the listeners, though, it seems like distractions are your worst enemy for flow, and the smallest thing can throw you out of it quite quickly. So.
One cannot sit down and say, I shall now be in flow. Like it takes 15 to 23 minutes, to kind of like drop in and everything falls away. And when you're interrupted, you repeat that process. It's not like you snap your fingers and you're like, I'm back to where I was. Like you said, it takes probably 20 minutes to get back in the zone, back in flow. And I think that's something really important as you start to understand. Like when you're 16, you don't really have a sense of how your brain works. But once you've really had days where you're exhausted, you do start to understand it like a muscle.
There seems to be so many consistencies that I see across these high performers. And one thing just to touch on, back to your very first, when you're telling our story, one of the things that struck me the most actually, which is maybe weird, but like how people you trusted gave you advice and you listened. Like you were humble and you listened to advice. which is maybe weird, but like so many people don't do that. They'll get a mentor, they'll get a coach. People further in their career will give them advice, but we have so much, like I think humans tend to have a lot of arrogance. But right at the beginning of your story, when you're talking about producing, right? You said, and you listened, which I think that trait of humbleness is something I've seen across so many different elite performers from banking, hedge funders, Hollywood. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's something that I've seen consistently.
There is a Henry Ford, if I had done what people told me, would be making faster horses kind of mentality. Or there's, Steve Jobs, no one asked me, that sort of thing, right? It's like, I am the singular vision. I'm a visionary. I'm going to do this. That is culturally iconographic here, right? And I know that at points in my life, I've felt torn between, do I need to be steadfast in my vision of like, this is what we need to do? And do I, alternatively need to really solicit the advice of other people and factor them into my decision? So yes, when I said I wanted to embark on this new thing to try and become a producer of film, not a visual effects producer, right? Visual effects producer. I went to people who'd done that. It's like, tell me, draw the line between where I am and that. And I trusted them and it worked out really well, right? Pencil and paper, like move muscles in your hand to do this. Don't dictate into theory. And I wrote to myself, what would I tell myself to do differently? Both times the first word was listen. Because I had bought into that idea of I have to have a singular vision, and people who are giving me advice on what I need to do differently, they just don't see my vision. And in reality, with the benefit of hindsight, I realized that some of the things they said were spot on. And sometimes it's hard to sift through in the moment because we're living going forward, not backwards, which is the gold, which is, the fool's gold, right? But it was there. And that guides me in my current company in a big way. I have both those sheets of paper, and the top word in block capitals on both sheets of paper is listen. When we build new features, when we launch things and people in the group chat, our members tell us how we're doing, I value that over anything else. That is the most important input in what we're going to build next, or features we're going to kill. I think it's a great idea. Everyone hates it. Kill it. So I don't mean to say that my process is always right. Sometimes it's wrong, but I try to learn.
One question I will ask though is, we get a lot of unsolicited advice as well. Particularly me, like everyone's very excited, and there's how do you sift through it and listen to what's right and make decisions based off it?
Well, I think the first criterion that I use is a hard one, which is I try to only take advice from someone who has done the thing. Because there are a lot of people who can tell you, oh, this is too salty or that's overcooked. Da, da, da. Okay, I hear you, and I'll try and adjust. But when someone who actually knows how to cook that steak talks to me, I prioritize that over everything. So I really try and seek out people who have done the thing. Whether it is, hey, man, like we need to figure out the top of funnel marketing for this kind of, B2C SaaS product. A lot of people give advice. What you should do is advertise to these left-handed plumbers and do that. No, you know what? Do you know anyone that worked at this B2C SaaS company? Can I talk to them about what they did in the early days? And I'll give you a bit of advice here. An advisor, and I consider a friend, was the head of growth for Grammarly. Do you know that app that helps you type? He gave me advice on the website, and he said, you are actually creating this website. There's all of these sort of modules talking about, oh, well, we have flow music and we have, block your phone and block your websites and the thing. And then, by the way, this is how flow states work. He said, no. He said, we did extensive A/B testing of this. People get lost in that, and you think it's great because they want to get all their questions answered. And if you ask them, they're like, well, I need to know 17 things before I can use your thing. He's like, it's actually a lie. They're telling you wrong. He's like, you should have one page that very simply lets them know, is this for me? And a button to sign up and try it. He's like, watch what happens to conversion. And everyone will tell you this is wrong, except the data. And he was right. If you can, you got to talk to someone who's done the thing. Prioritize that over, the armchair quarterbacks.
Great advice. How about trust too? I guess that goes with it, Steven. Like goes when you go to maybe life decisions. So that's like a business decision, but like when you're thinking of that career change that you did and all that, what made you decide to take the advice of others versus not for a personal life-changing decision?
I do believe that, that sense of putting yourself around the people who have done what you want to do and talking to people because what you're doing probably someone else has done is much more available than you think. If you approach someone, you're like, hey, Shawn, I know you are an executive at studio and I have a script. Could you read my script and buy it? You're going to be like, get out of my face. Like there's a whole structure to keep you away from me, right? But if I approach you and say, Shawn, I followed your career through, when you were at Lionsgate and then you worked on these movies and this one propelled you into, Paramount and then now you're here. And I'd love to learn a little more about your career because I'm right now as a junior executive at the studio. Suddenly it frames it entirely differently in your mind. You feel respected, understood, you feel seen. And you're like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Come by the office. I'll have coffee sometime. Right. And then I get to access you going, hey man, I'm 15 years earlier in my career than you. Can you walk me through some of the moves you think I'd be making? Because you've done the thing. You're a studio chairman now, and I want to be one in 15 years.
I've got one question that was on my list that I do want to ask. How did the core principles of your mentors like Cal Newport and James Clear inspire the decisions to build your company?
I'll tell you, they didn't. They're giants in the business. Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm a guy who's trying to help people do something with their lives, right? They've written books that we all quote. They've done research. They've spent great respect. But what I mean is not to disrespect them. Rather, to say, if you want to know how this became the thing that I'm the most proud of in my life, it really comes from pain. I recognized I procrastinate. I recognize that I get distracted. And I got sick of having 6 o'clocks where I'm like, man, I was busy all day, but I didn't do the thing. And, Laura, after dinner, can we try and make this a quick dinner? Shawn always goes on and on. Can we try and get out of there because I have to do more work tonight after dinner? That's a horrible feeling. If necessity is the mother of invention, for me, pain was sort of something that drove me forward, where I was working with a friend, helping him with a to-do list sort of app, productivity tool, Shawn, for you. So at a certain point, he was like, I have to tap out. I'm going to have a child. He had a daughter. He's like, I could go get a regular job working for, Facebook or something. Kidding, sort of. And I was like, you know what? I really think that what we started to build speaks to me because I think a flow state app would be really powerful in the world today, especially as we watch all of our other friends build the distracting apps that try to destroy your life. So for me, it was, oh, wow. Now you and I both know we are diagnosed with ADHD. At the time, I had the symptoms of it, but I was never thinking of myself that way. I knew I was dyslexic. Like to talk right now, I have to really concentrate on saying things properly, but I wasn't really that aware of the ADD, ADHD thing. So that was, for me, I realized really the thing that inspired me. And then the people we talk about, like learning from Mihai, from what he's written. I don't personally know him. I did meet Cal Newport, which is kind of cool. And Near, who lives in Singapore with you guys, he's written some great stuff on traction, distraction, and, internal, external triggers. You read enough of that and it does influence, hey, I think we could build something that reflects this knowledge. But it wasn't that knowledge that inspired it. It was my own pain.
You know what's really wild when you were just saying that is we had a pricing call this week. So our product, Shawn, is incredible. He has come up with the world's first formula to combat decision fatigue. We know decision fatigue is physiological, and we have the first formula. It's clinically proven, patented, and it's a sachet for now. Numin. Umin. And that means an opening of the brain. That's correct, Shawn, right?
Wow, let's go in what language?
That's actually derived from the word numinous, which is like a moment of awe-inspiring magnitude. So it could actually be like that.
What a great name.
In yoga, when you feel like that internal connection, it could be a spiritual connection. It's that feeling when you make a great decision. You know, when you're just like really
Newman
done something great. So,
but just coming back to the pricing. So we were in a call this week and pre-orders are live and we're going out on Amazon soon. And so we just, is our pricing right? Have we got this right? And one thing I kept trying to articulate to the team was, but what are people paying for? And again, just like that guy said to you, he's paying for that time with his children. What's the price of our product? Like, what's it giving them? Is it giving people productivity? Is that the price of productivity? Is that the price of flow state? Is that the price of finishing work early so you can be with your children? The price of a good decision, because ultimately we are combating decision fatigue. We're allowing people to make better decisions with confidence and clarity. So they're paying for, higher quality of decisions. And so we're really I'm sure it's going to be different for everybody. And so I think maybe we do need to start speaking to our early customers and ask, what are you paying for?
Maybe this costs $20. But what's the price of a bad decision? Suddenly I'm like, wow, I could lose hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars making the wrong financial decision. So for $20, I could head that off. Clearly. Newman me.
Newman.
Get me Newman. I don't know. I'm
Get on Newman.
I'm workshopping it. I'm trying to go up with something.
I like it. That's our first ad campaign. Newman me.
Newman me. Yeah, we always say make every decision count. And this is, of course, kind of the podcast is very, very, very top of funnel. And the podcast, is all around really just getting people thinking about their decisions differently. And, that your decisions have weight and meaning.
When that is available, we should drop it in the group chat of Suko because that's seems very adjacent to what we do.
100%.
It's exactly what you guys do. Different lane, obviously, but like it's the same.
Yeah, it's collaborative.
It's the same. What you guys, and I'm a big fan of what you guys are chasing and the vision.
Oh, Shawn, we're a productivity app, and you hate us. It's just say it. Just go. I don't need one more thing, Steven.
No, it's not. Well, as I understand
take
it,
my money.
Yeah,
thank you, Michelle. You're welcome over for dinner anytime you want. Shawn,
I will try it.
Right. I will try it with a healthy dose of skepticism.
But you're like the flip side of the productivity app, right? It's like I think you're chasing what productivity actually is, which is like less, right? It's about that
we want to
focus.
Simplify, yes, allow your brain to block everything out and focus on the one thing. That's
exactly. So it's like an anti-traditional. I don't want to say anti, that's terrible marketing, but that's why I'm not a marketer.
Right. It's the antidote to Notion. There's my word. It's the antidote.
That's what it is. Yeah, when you're slacked out.
Oh, God. Can I tell you, we're building that feature where when you hit play and the music starts and your system and everything's blocked, it puts your Slack in do not disturb in away mode. So if anyone slacks you, they get a message, I'm in a flow session. And they know you're not getting back to them right now. There's no pressure to return that because they're like, oh, shit, Shawn's in flow. Why don't we hear from him for an hour?
I love it. I've never felt so incompetent to tell you about Michelle when she has all of these things and she it works. It works for her. And
yeah,
I'm like
an ADHD goddess.
She is. And I feel like I'm an 80-year-old. Like I'm at my computer and then this pops up and I have to like scroll to click. Like, oh, what's this whole chain? And there's rooms and hashtags. And
your kids are like, Daddy, stop touching the screen. It's not a touch screen.
Yeah, it's overwhelming for me. So, no, I don't think, I don't know, Michelle. I don't know if you have ADHD. You have a superpower. They mislabeled you. Yeah. So the lady who listens to videos on double speed. Successfully. Yep. Yeah.
I get that.
But I was thinking, with this new diagnosis, I'm like, oh, maybe that's why, it's part of for all those dopamine hits that I'm getting from finishing like 5 books a week. But it's also like the processing speed of my brain might just be accelerated and therefore I can consume content at that speed. And
that's really cool. If you guys could listen to one podcast, what is the one podcast you listen to? And you can't name your own, name someone else. Come on.
Diary of a CEO, probably at the moment. I'm just getting through that.
Shawn, how are you going to top that?
For me,
he's going to tell you he doesn't listen to podcasts.
I don't really listen to podcasts. I'm more of a reader.
I don't think they're that good, actually.
who listens to podcasts? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
If I were to, the one actually I do, which I realize is a podcast and I didn't know it, is Space Time on PBS.
Space Time. Okay, we're going to look that up real quick.
Space Time. Yeah, I actually had to Google his name and I apologize for that if he ever gets this. I didn't know his last name, but Matt O'Dowd, I think is the guy. Phenomenal for people who...
Matt O'Dowd, Australian astrophysicist Matt O'Dowd. Okay.
Yeah, if you love the wonder of space and physics and quantum mechanics, he's a very accessible level for most people, but it's an amazing show. So,
what about you, Steven?
You know what? I have listened to so many this year because I spoke to a bunch of people in our community who talked about podcasts, and they named a lot of podcasts that I did not know, like yours. So I have listened to a smattering, like a sampling of 100 podcasts since January, and I can't tell you the one that if I had to eliminate all the others, this is the one I'd always listen to. You said something earlier, Shawn, at the beginning of this, where you said the podcast has afforded me the opportunity to meet a lot of people I wouldn't normally meet and have the interesting conversations. And, I count this among those, I hope. We'll see. But that was the sense that I got from this overview of podcasts. And I was like, wow, like if this was my neighborhood and I bumped into these people walking the dog sort of thing, it would be fascinating to go to dinner with so many of them, not all, but many.
I see why. I mean, when we started this, I'm like, oh God, a podcast, I'm a scientist. I like my lab. I really like people. But now it's a wonder. I would keep doing this for years because you get to meet just incredible people and hopefully the audience. And I get it now because you get exposure to really fascinating people you never would normally interact with, which is cool.
In the beginning, we talked about your cancer diagnosis in the introduction. And so I would just really like to touch on it and hear from you how that has shaped the decisions you make.
I don't think as much as other things. I think impending fatherhood has made me think a lot more about what do I put back into the world. I think, this specter of what is happening, and I go on next Wednesday, Thursday, I go back to MD Anderson for more CT scans and all the stuff. That made me contemplate, maybe the shape of the road ahead is not the shape I contemplated. And there are many good outcomes that are possible. I'm not going to die in this podcast. I die from what they found, but it's just that sense of, I'm not invincible, which when you're in your 20s, you do think you're invincible. So I recognize there's a limited amount of time, and it may not be a week. It may not be 20 years. Who knows? But the shape of it will be slightly different than I thought.
It's interesting that facing your own mortality hasn't shifted your decision making as much as becoming a father.
Yeah, because that's going to outlive me.
100%.
You know the road ahead of me better than I do.
Yeah. Makes you step into the person you want to become.
I'm trying to put some good into the world. And I appreciate your having me on your podcast to talk about these things.
Yeah. It's been such an amazing conversation. We've
one of the best.
Covered so much. And but really, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate your time. It's been fascinating.
This was great. And however, we have a relationship now. If there are things I can do to contribute to what you're doing, let me know. As Newman becomes a verb and I proudly use it in at the grocery store. Do you have any Newman? I'd like to be Newman today, I'll proudly share that. And if there are things that I can mention to our community about, hey, guess what's out? And, I've met these people and this is what they're doing. And if it's interesting to you, like, here's how to avail yourself of it, let me know.
Definitely. We'll send you some in about 2 weeks. So you let us know.
Oh, wow. That's really? Wow.
Drinknewman.com. Pre-orders have gone nuts. So this is obviously resonating with people, which is really exciting.
It is inspiring to be around you guys with marathons being run, books being written, and products being launched. This is a great time to have met you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wild. And to all of our listeners, we'll link to everything below. You want to connect with Steven, check everything out. We'll make sure everything's in the show notes. And as always, make every decision count. We'll see you next week. Bye.